Hello and very welcome. Our channel narrates the life stories of our viewers from all around the world. To protect individuals' privacy, names are sometimes altered in the stories. My name is Alice, a pretty girl whom everyone complimented on my beauty and cuteness since I was a child. This attention boosted my confidence, making me believe that wherever I went, everyone would like me. As a result, by middle school, I began dating various boys. Since my family wasn't strict or religious, they didn't criticize or restrict my clothing choices. I did whatever I wanted, and at that age, half of the boys in our neighborhood liked me. Eventually, my sister tried to guide me, warning that my behavior might not be in my best interest, but I didn't listen. When I entered high school, I decided to focus seriously on my studies, and that's when I met a girl named Anna. Anna's family had just moved to our neighborhood, and I was the first friend she made. Anna was a mischievous girl, and after we became friends, things got even more lively for both of us. At the start of our friendship, I'd often tell her that it was like God had created a second version of me, and that was her. Anna and I became very close friends, even though my older sister didn't like Anna's behavior. Still, I didn't let anyone disrupt our friendship. We studied together and turned 18, deciding together that we were done with school. Around that time, I received a marriage proposal. Ilya, a well-educated boy from a respectable family, had fallen deeply in love with me. I also liked his looks and wealth. On the day of his proposal, he was so calm and composed that I thought I'd fallen in love at first sight. Although Ilya's family didn't see me as an ideal match for him due to my young age and decision to quit studying, Ilya was determined to marry me. Since we lived in the same neighborhood, we already knew each other a little from a distance. After the initial conversations and my agreement to marry, the dates for the ceremonies were set. Anna was happier for me than anyone else and supported me a lot during that time. There were moments when I felt anxious and worried about losing my freedom and the things I used to do, but Anna gave me advice, teaching me the tricks to understand men. Even though Ilya didn't seem like the kind of man who would try to restrict me, I still had my concerns. Finally, after a few months, our wedding took place, and it was beautiful. Ilya's family, being financially well off, spared no expense, and the house Ilya bought for us was only a few blocks away from my own family's home. In the early days of our marriage, everything was wonderful. Ilya paid a lot of attention to me, and I was thrilled with the excitement of newlywed life. Even though his family occasionally made remarks that bothered me, Ilya's kindness washed away all my frustrations. Anna often praised my life and got along well with Ilya. They were like brother and sister. Sometimes Ilya would tell me that since Anna was single, her lifestyle wasn't always suitable for me, but he didn't have any issues with her, and my marriage didn't disrupt our strong friendship. Some time passed in our marriage, and Ilya was always respectful, never once treating me poorly, even during arguments, though we rarely fought, as Ilya was so calm that he never let things escalate. My life was going well, and I even started considering finding a match for Anna with one of Ilya's good friends, Seper, whom I liked and thought would be a good fit for her. Then, one day, Anna called me and told me that it was one of her friend's birthdays, and she wanted us both to go together to the party. I initially refused and told her that since I can't stay out late, I couldn't go with her to that party. But Anna insisted and said she would talk to Ilya herself and get his permission for me. After that, she hung up to call Ilya. A few minutes later, she called me back and said that Ilya had agreed. I couldn't believe it, so I told her I needed to talk to Ilya myself. That's when Anna confessed that she had lied to Ilya and just told him that, since his place was empty, I would come stay over with her for the night, and she hadn't mentioned the party at all. When I heard this from Anna, I argued with her and told her that I'd never lied to Ilya before. And if I was going to that party with her, I'd rather tell Ilya the truth so that, whether he agreed or not, he'd at least know what was really happening. Then Anna brought up the fact that there was a guy at the party she liked, and she wanted me to be the first one to meet him. She said that, in her experience with guys, a man would never let his wife go to a mixed gathering. In that sense, I understood her point. I was also sure that Ilya wouldn't agree to me going to that party. But I was torn about whether I wanted to misuse the trust Ilya and I had in each other. Still, Anna kept insisting and even swore that she really wanted me to come to the party with her. I told her I'd think it over, and if I could bring myself to go along, I would join her. A few hours passed after our call, and I was still torn. I knew that if Ilya ever found out I told him such a big lie, he'd be very upset. Though Ilya was usually a calm person, I'd seen how he acted when something bothered him. As calm as he was, his anger was intense, and most importantly, he was very sensitive about lying and deception. This was one of the first things he'd told me early in our relationship, and he always reminded me that even if I made a mistake, it was better to tell him myself rather than try to fool him with lies. Despite this, Anna's insistence won over the rational thoughts I was having. I called Anna and told her I'd be ready at the time she mentioned so she could pick me up. Then I called Ilya again and repeated Anna's lie to him. And Ilya replied so kindly that my guilt grew. I thought to myself that he trusted me so much that he'd accept my word after just hearing it once, but in that moment I was swayed by Anna's persuasion and felt responsible for supporting her. I told myself that if I didn't go with her, I wouldn't be fulfilling my duty as a friend. Even though I knew what I was doing was wrong, I got ready, and before Ilya came home, Anna picked me up, and we went to the party. In the car, Anna kept thanking me. Although I told her face to face that I really didn't want to come to that party with her, I came along because I didn't want to leave her alone on such an important night. When we got to the party, there were a lot of people gathered around, and they were all young men and women. Smoke filled the air. I sat in a corner the whole time, and whenever a guy tried to approach, I just answered politely to make him leave. After a while, I asked Anna where her crush was, and about half an hour later, he showed up. He was a handsome guy, and he and Anna seemed to make a good match, but based on appearances, I could already tell he wasn't suited for a committed relationship. I even shared this thought with Anna, but she said she had a different mindset from me and didn't want a man with outdated beliefs. That's why she liked that guy and even intended to marry him. Since the party lasted late, I wasn't worried because I had told Ilya that I would stay at Anna's house that night. So I was definitely planning to return home in the morning or around noon. The party continued until around 3 a.m, and eventually we were about to leave. I was very tired, and we wanted to go to Anna's house, which was a secret apartment she had gotten for herself. We got into the car, but along the way the car broke down, and we were far from Anna's place. We couldn't just leave the car at the side of the road that late at night, so we called roadside assistance. At first, there was no answer, but after waiting a long time, finally, they sent someone over. 2 young, good-looking guys showed up, and both Anna and I had had enough to drink that we weren't fully aware of ourselves. I had a bad headache because I wasn't used to drinking, but I had been tempted to have some that night. The 2 young men, who seemed to like us, started asking questions, like what party we were coming from and where we were headed. Anna started sharing the details of everything, and I, unlike usual, joined in on the conversation, laughing and chatting, forgetting that I was married and the possible consequences that could come from this later. We kept talking and laughing with those guys, and after they took the car to their facility, they offered to accompany us to Anna's place. At first, I thought they might just be worried about us since we were 2 young girls. But on the way, they took the drinks Anna had with her and drank them. And by then, none of us were fully aware of what we were doing. Even I, who usually stayed mindful. The 2 guys came into the apartment and one kept coming close to me, while the other went toward Anna. They ended up staying with us that night. But when we woke up in the morning, those 2 guys were gone, and I felt an unusual pain in my body. When I looked at myself and at Anna, I realized what had happened between the 4 of us that night. I quickly woke Anna up and told her what had happened to us. She was panicking, and I was worried about what kind of answer I could give as a married woman. I gathered my things and returned home, where I saw that Ilya had left for work and no one was home. At least I had a few hours to myself to gather my thoughts and figure out what I would say to Ilya. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I noticed some marks on my body that Ilya would surely notice, revealing my lie. That day, Anna also had to reveal the address of her apartment to her sister because of what had happened. She ended up losing the apartment, as her family wouldn't allow her to keep it, though she didn't spend much time there anyway. That day, I didn't say anything to my husband, and Ilya didn't mention anything either. But 2 nights later, Ilya tried to get close to me, and I pulled away. When I noticed his face turned somber, I told him that I was feeling a cold coming on and didn't want him to get sick. Although Ilya was upset, I managed to get through the night. Later, Anna told me that one of those guys had called her. He was the same guy who had helped with her car that night, and since he had her number, he asked to meet up. I agreed to go, and we arranged to meet the 2 guys. They had given us the address of a guest house. Although I was reluctant to go, I went again at Anna's insistence. She said that since what happened had already happened, at least if he was a good guy, she could stay in touch with him. And apparently, he had shown interest in her. When we arrived at the guest house, both guys were there. They started offering us refreshments, and Anna acted as if nothing had happened. But when she told one of the guys that it was wrong of him to get close to us, he claimed that we had actually been the ones to ask for it that night. Since we had all had a lot to drink, we couldn't clearly remember anything from that night. They brought us some juice, and after drinking it, I felt a heaviness in my head. I thought it was due to the stress I had been under for the past few days, but then suddenly I blacked out. When I woke up, I found myself and Anna in the same bad situation we had been in that day at her apartment. The 2 guys were gone. This time, when we woke up and tried to leave the guest house, I saw that guy, whose name was Lucas, coming toward me. Then he calmly suggested that if we still had time, we should go hang out together. Not fully understanding what was going on, I just ran away from there, with Anna following me. That day, I didn't feel well at all and noticed changes in my body. That night, Ilya was in a great mood and, like 2 nights before, wanted to get close to me. I tried to keep my distance again, but this time Ilya, usually so calm and gentle, said lovingly that even if he caught my sickness and it came from me, it would be as sweet as honey to him. After that, I couldn't keep him away and he got close to me. But after a few moments, his gaze lingered on me and he noticed my injury. He asked me about it and I realized he was suspicious, but he didn't want to say anything outright. Still, the more he looked at me, the more he was certain something had happened to me. Finally, he couldn't hold it in and said he was sure I was involved with someone else because the changes in my body weren't normal and wouldn't have happened naturally. Out of fear, tears started streaming down my face. Ilya knew I was exposed. That night, he was different from the Ilya I knew. He started yelling and breaking everything around him while I just cried. A huge fight broke out in our home, and the next day, Ilya told me that he had loved me until then, but from that moment, he hated me and didn't want to live under the same roof with a woman who'd betrayed him and chosen a fleeting desire over him. Knowing that if Ilya left me, my reputation would be ruined, I started crying and begging, but it was no use to him, and he stood firm in his decision. I thought he might forgive me, because he had always loved me passionately, and never expected him to push me away like this. But Ilya himself eventually broke down, crying and shouting, saying that he had been in love with me, and never thought I'd break his heart and betray him. He even told me that he had stood up to his family for me, believing I was a good woman. Even when his family had told him I wasn't suitable for him, he hadn't left me. He said he never expected such behavior from me. That night, Ilya kept saying he wanted a divorce, and I couldn't insist anymore. He handed me my bag and wanted me to leave the house that very night. I cried, asking him to at least respect the time we had spent together and give me some time. The next day, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, the person introduced himself as Lucas. At that moment, I recognized him and started yelling at him, regardless of how terrible I felt. Lucas told me he'd come to pick me up and take me with him. At that moment, Ilya threw me out of the house with just a bag of clothes. I had no other option, so I went to Lucas. And even Anna no longer had an empty place of her own. I told Anna everything that had happened that day, and she couldn't believe Ilya would be the kind of man to so quickly want to get rid of his wife. Yet, even I realized that I had wronged Ilya and lied to him, even though I knew the one thing he hated was being lied to. Lucas rented a room for me at the same guest house and stayed nearby, saying it wasn't safe to leave me alone there. However, I argued with him, telling him that he had ruined my life and brought me to this point, so he didn't need to feel sorry for me. A few days passed and I still felt unwell, in shock over everything that had happened to me. Then I received a call from my sister, followed by a text message urging me to contact her immediately. At that moment, I realized that Ilya had told her everything. I called my sister, who said she needed to see me, so I gave her the address of the guest house. When my sister arrived, she started scolding me, saying that Anna had finally shown her true influence on my life. She'd always known that Anna wasn't a good friend for me. I defended myself, saying I hadn't done anything, and that it was just Ilya's suspicion. However, My sister told me Ilya was certain of his suspicions, adding that if he doubted me even slightly, he would never have accused his own wife like that. She then handed me a document and informed me that Ilya wanted a divorce. I tried to talk to Ilya, but he was resolute. To protect my family's reputation, we decided on a mutual separation. He granted me a portion of my rights, and we finalized the divorce. Although my family was very upset, for a while we heard whispers from neighbors, talking behind my back, since I had just recently married, and for them it was shocking for a newlywed to divorce so soon. Lucas was still reaching out to me, refusing to leave me alone. At first, I tried to fill my loneliness with him since he seemed to express genuine affection for me. Meanwhile, Anna's life had also turned upside down because she had lost the guy she liked. The mechanic she was seeing turned out not to be a decent person. One day, when Anna and I were sitting together, talking as we used to, she admitted that she had always been too carefree and had never had a real plan for her life. Now, in her late 20s, she realized her mistakes, feeling that her prime years were gone. She even apologized to me for being part of the reason my marriage fell apart, admitting that if she hadn't pushed me that day, I might still be living with my husband. I always believed that everyone has a destiny, some parts of which they can change and others that are in God's hands. If something is meant to happen, it will happen. Even so, I acknowledge my own mistakes, knowing I had let curiosity tempt me because I had married young and hadn't had the chance to experience the youthful freedom and excitement that most young women find appealing. I understood that I had to accept my own responsibility for the mistakes I had made. Since then, Anna has undergone a transformation, becoming more spiritual in her outlook. However, Lucas still pursued me, constantly calling and texting, eager to stay connected with me. This time I decided to consult with my sister, telling her about Lucas, how we had met, where things had gone, and how he was acting now. My sister listened and warned me, saying that any man who, while at work, thought of pursuing such a relationship likely wasn't trustworthy. She suggested that if I got involved with him, he might eventually turn to someone else because people like him develop habits for such behavior. Lucas's persistence went so far that he came to my family's doorstep, trying to humiliate me. My sister reassured my family, saying that such things could happen to anyone, and reminded them that they needed to support me so that I'd know I had my family behind me. With their support, I no longer had anything to fear, and Lucas lost his leverage over me. Seeing that his attempts were getting him nowhere, Lucas eventually stopped contacting me. Not long afterward, I found out that Ilya had married another woman. In that moment, I realized that people aren't always as we perceive them to be. Perhaps Ilya wasn't truly a good man, and maybe he had turned away from me at the same time I had. Fate had unfolded in a way that separated me from Ilya, and I ended up in a very different place in my life. Despite my sadness, with my sister and family's help, I managed to pull myself together, setting new goals for myself. Years have passed since those events, and I decided never to marry again, even though Anna married a wonderful man 3 years after everything happened. However, I remained firm in my decision. When I reached my 30s, I took steps to adopt a daughter, and my family agreed with my decision, even though they had previously urged me to give marriage another chance. But I didn't waver. After going through the legal process, I was able to bring a little girl into my life. It's been several years now since all those events happened. Ilya married another woman and eventually divorced her as well. I never remarried, and my friendship with Anna remained strong. I've come to realize that sometimes certain people and events cross our paths to shift our lives in a new direction, leading us down an entirely different road. It has taught me that the best approach is to let go and accept life's twists and turns with grace. Today, I'm raising my daughter, Helen. I've turned the upstairs of my parents' house into our own little space, and we're building a good life together. Love never re-entered my life, though sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. Still, I'm content with my decision now.